Mark Fox, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mark Divine Show. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's great, and thanks for reaching out. It was I'll just say this up front for the listener, but Mark and I met down at a place called the Wizard Academy, and it's kind of a fun. In fact, just the name of Roy's school attracted me before I knew anything about Roy. Right? He's like, I'd love to be a wizard, but we met at the Wizard Academy, and that was years ago, where Roy plied us with wine while we tried to learn the theory of invention, which is pretty awesome.
Right,
I want to
right.
come back to that, but anyway, so it's good to see you again. And I always start this show by just asking kind of like the formative question of like, where are you from, and what were your early influences that led you to become a space engineer and got you into kind of like all that fascinating field of
Like,
invention and creativity.
yeah, I mean, as far as the rocket stuff, so I grew up, I live in Cocoa Beach now, and this is where I'm actually in the house I actually grew up in. So I grew up near Cape Canaveral. My dad was a rocket scientist. He worked on the Air Force Titan motor, and I'm like,
Did he?
I don't want anything to do with rockets. I just was around it my whole life. So it's like, I graduated in 1983. I was a chemical engineer. My best friend was a nuclear physicist, and we were hanging drywall for $3.50 an hour. So it's like,
That's
so,
fun,
so this is not going to cut it. And nobody was hiring anybody back in 1983. It was just a
right?
slump in hiring, right? And then somebody said, "Hey, did you ever put your application to the Cape to Morton Thiokol? They just won the shuttle processing contract." I'm like, "No, I never heard of them." So I put in my resume there, and that was one of the most interesting malicious compliance things that I've ever seen. I walk in and I'm expecting, a bunch of hard interview questions, and the guy says, "So we're Morton Thiokol. We build solid rocket motors, specialty chemical, and salt. It pays $12.14 an hour." I go, "Well, what am I going to be doing?" And he opens a manila folder with my resume, runs his finger down it. He goes, "How do I know? Engineering stuff." I was like, "Okay, when do I start?" He goes, "Now." I go, "Can I go home?" Okay. So I found out it was a cost plus contract, right? And basically, this as the head of HR was given the direction, we got slots for 80 engineers. So if they have a degree and a heartbeat, I don't care how dumb they are, just hire them and we'll figure out how to get rid of them later, right? Because they were losing money. So it's like, okay, well,
I
I
love how
figured,
our government works.
yeah,
Jeez.
I thought I'd be there, a month or something, and I was there like 17 years. So I worked on the space shuttle after I was actually at the launch pad the day Challenger happened
I
in
was just
January.
going to ask you if you were involved at that point. That was
Yeah, I was
incredible.
at the launch pad there. I'd been in the company 2.5 years, so I I actually ended up moving to Utah to work on the redesign. Um,
Sorry about
so,
that.
yeah, no problem.
I'm going to go close the door from that.
Okay.
Sorry. It's my
No,
stepdaughter's dog. She won't leave me alone, but sometimes she barks, which
yeah, no problem.
dogs
So
do.
I ended up moving to Utah after to work on the redesign of the solid rocket boosters, and you know, we don't have time to go. Maybe some other episode, but everyone. Yes, the O rings failed on the boosters, but there was. It's not what you heard in the news. It's not what you've seen on documentaries. None of that
Right.
is true. It's a whole lot more that was behind the decisions and stuff. And
Really.
yeah, a
Give me
lot
a
of people.
general idea of what you're talking about. Because there've been a lot of case studies and leadership done on that.
There
You
have
know,
been, and people have asked me to, and they all revolve around management being stupid and not listening to engineers. And that's kind of crazy. Is so the solid the short version is the solid rocket boosters never postponed a launch before because they don't. Once you light them, they go. And
right.
the launch before Challenger, we actually canceled the launch because of wave heights in the ocean because we
Mhm.
had to recover the booster, it's floating vertically, and you have to take like a big cork plug, put it in the nozzle, pump the water out, make it buoyant.
Right.
Well, we had lost. We had one of our divers get sucked in the motor and couldn't get out, so
Oh
he
my.
ended up dying. So we changed the criteria for wave height. Okay, um, so the NASA manager in charge of our boosters, he was really upset that he like, who came up with this criteria? You did. We all did, right? Because we killed a person. So we changed the criteria. And he's like, what happens if we just let them sink? You're the customer. You can do that. That's $20 million in hardware, but if you want to. So that's what we did. We launched and they sank. And
Okay. Huh.
some bean counter somewhere probably filled out a piece of paper that said for his job description, he can only scrap $5 million worth of hardware. So he ended up at NASA headquarters explaining to his bosses why he scrapped this hardware. So that happened to launch before Challenger. So then when we said, it's too cold to launch, it's in the direction of badness, he's like, prove it isn't safe to launch, which is the opposite of what you've always done on the program, because he was upset from the previous launch, right?
Hmm.
So, and the answer is, have you ever flown anything colder than this? Yes, we've flown 5 or 6 missions colder than that. Is it out of specification? No, but there's not a specification for O-ring temperature,
Right.
right? So it was in the direction of badness, but the punchline, Mark, what happened, which you won't read anywhere, is the external tank that had liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, it leaked all the time, and it
Okay.
leaked on the boosters. We know that because it was 36 degrees out and windy, but the boosters were 9 degrees and 14 Fahrenheit. Now, most people think wind chill. Wind chill doesn't exist unless you have a heartbeat, right?
Right.
So there has to be something really keeping those boosters cold, because 36-degree wind is a hot wind compared to 9 and 14.
Right.
So we did some calculations. So we know that's what happened, is the external tank leaked cryogens on the O-rings. So the O-rings did fail, but the external tank had problems as well. And the number one issue on the program at the time was the turbine blades on the main engines of the orbiter. I mean, they're this big around. They're going from ambient temperature to like 38,000 RPM in a second.
Wow.
And then they're
Yeah.
getting thermal shocked with this hydrogen oxygen. So they cracked all the
Right.
time. So you always had cracked blades. Everyone that saw that happen in Challenge, like, finally lost a blade. We were afraid this was going to happen someday, right? So the reality is, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. And actually, Ronald Reagan got on one of the conference calls with us, and people started to point fingers, and he said, "Everybody shut the blank up." And it was silence.
I love
He goes,
Ronnie.
"This is the most technical achievement in the world. Fix it." And that was it. So nobody hears, my company spent $500 million in 2.5 years fixing the boosters. Martin Marietta, who owned the tank at the time, they spent $1 billion. And then Rocketdyne on the turbine blade spent $2 billion, but nobody ever heard about that in the news, getting
Right.
the other stuff fixed, right? So the O-rings were an issue, but, and when you get this finger pointing, well, these engineers said, that you shouldn't have flown. Well, there's always a handful of engineers on a rocket test that say, I'm not comfortable with going, because
Right.
it's a bomb, right? You're trying to control it. And
Yeah.
so I always say this to people, the space shuttle program was a 30-year experiment, like most rockets are, right?
Right.
So that's the shortest version I can give you. There's a lot of other things that were happening at the same time, but it wasn't just management not listening to engineers. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
much more complicated than that.
The technology today that Elon and I assume NASA, although I have a different perspective on Artemis and that hodgepodge lodge of people coming together to build a spaceship versus the very focused SpaceX. I guess there's pros and cons, but how does that technology compare to what's the Challenger and the space shuttle program?
A lot of the rocket stuff, right? I mean, the engines and stuff are not that different.
Okay.
They're using methane or kerosene and oxygen. What is different by far, obviously, is flying the boosters back to a barge or to the
Yeah.
landing pad. That is,
That's
Mark, if you have not seen that in real life, you have to come stay at my house for one weekend.
I
You
would
can
love
watch
to
my.
see that. I have seen, Elon's little videos of the thing landing on a barge. I'm like, how do they do that?
It doesn't.
That's pretty
The
incredible.
videos don't do it. It looks like George Jetson. I mean, it's if you have an afternoon flight where the sun's already setting, right? So you can see the first stage booster with the sun shining on it. You see it turn around, and then you start calculating math and looking at it. I explain this to people being engineers, like, okay, you see that little gas that's coming out of it? Well, that booster's this big. That gas is expanding 10 miles in a quarter of a second or a
Wow.
hundredth of a second. So it looks very odd to watch it come back, and then it's falling at Mach 4 or Mach 6 or something. So you can't process. And when you see two of them from the heavy vehicle, when you see two boosters coming back to the launch pad, they light up at about, I don't get this exactly right, I think it's about 80,000 feet, and then again around 10,000 to slow it down. But it comes screaming at that launch pad. It's moving a clip right before it gets to the ground.
That's
It's
crazy.
amazing
So
to
they
watch.
actually slow it down so it just settles onto the launch pad, or is
Yeah,
it?
I
Is
mean,
it?
I think at probably 10,000 feet, it's still going 500 miles an hour. And then it
Right.
just is burning at the last second and it just hovers for a second and then stops. And what's interesting, it's funny because where I live about 8 miles from the launch pad. So just by the timing, once it hits the ground, the sonic boom from 8 minutes earlier hits my house or hits where I'm at. So all the locals go, "Oh, well, that's the sound it makes when it hits the ground." No, that's
No,
not. That's
no.
the sonic boom from 7 or 8 minutes ago, and it just got here. And they don't,
Yeah.
people don't believe me. They're like, "No, that's not it." I'm like, "Well, yeah, yeah, it is."
That
But
is
yeah,
very cool.
they're amazing to watch. I mean, it's it's weird, Mark. I mean, it's like sometimes we have two a week or three a week, and I don't even know there's one going. There might be, you may hear one while we're doing this podcast, and then he's
Right.
launching that much. So
If you had
hats
the
off
opp-
to him. He's doing awesome.
Oh, it's amazing. If you had the opportunity to go out with SpaceX to Mars next week, would you go?
Not at this age. You know,
Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask about working for them. As I have several friends that work there, and they're on the grindstone.
It's
They don't,
brutal. Yeah.
yeah, they don't last long. I mean, a lot of the engineers
I
because they're
went up,
working.
I was invited, one of, I'm sorry, their chief medical officer, who was a former, no, he's a chief medical officer at NASA, was recruited for SpaceX. He was one of our clients and
Oh,
had
okay.
been through all my training, Kokoro, and then he invited me up to SpaceX to talk to the launch team before they did their first human powered flight. And man, some of the stories I got about the work ethic and just the grind, it's
Yeah,
intense, and the level of commitment required. But I loved the culture because they were like the Navy SEALs. They were like a failure is not an option culture, meaning like we're just going to keep on figuring this thing out at failure after failure after failure. Then boom, hey, we got to win. Awesome. Let's build on that. So
yeah. I
that's
mean, if that's true on Elon's documentary, right? I think he said he had budget for 4 motors, and they all blew up, or
right.
three. And then everyone thought they were out of a job. I think it was three. And then he goes, "Hey, we got money for one more, but this is the last shot," and it worked.
Right.
Right. So it could have not been. I mean, it was pretty close to happening, but no, it is. It's very impressive to. Again, it's hard to fathom what you're looking at when they come back, just because you're not used to seeing that. But
Right. Yeah, but you can see, in that technology is the same technology they'll use to land on, planets someday.
yeah, so they're a lot of them are using methane,
Right.
liquid methane oxygen, because you can harvest that potentially on Mars, and so you got
Right.
a refueling, a system that can be refueled, or there's a fuel capability there. So
Yeah. So you probably track this more than I do, but how close are we to getting to Mars? Elon, I remember he kept saying like 2026, or then, it gets pushed back a little bit, 2030. But what's your
I
take on
actually don't know, because I've been hearing that forever too.
it? Yeah.
And the long duration space flight is still a big issue. In fact, one of the device that we'll talk about, NASA's been using it for 50 years for bone density,
Have
right?
they?
So, and they use it on the space station for long. If you're on for a long flight, is
Hmm.
there's a pretty rapid decline in your bone density if you don't use something like that, right? So, I
Right.
don't know. Hopefully, it's in my lifetime to get to Mars and stuff, but it's still a big challenge just from the time to get there. 7
Yeah.
months or whatever it is in transportation, and then when you get there, there's nothing there,
There's
right?
nothing
So
there. Right. You got
there's
to
nothing there.
build.
There's
Yeah.
no
You got to
resources.
basically fight for your survival once you get there.
You got to build whatever you need, right, and 3D print it
Exactly.
and that type of thing. So
That's intense. Now, when we met down in Texas at the Wizard Academy, Roy Williams' place, you were teaching a class called Think Like Da Vinci, which is all based on what you call the theory of TRIZ. Can you help us understand what is TRIZ? What is this theory of invention, and where did it come from, and like how did it help you as a thinker and a creator and an inventor?
okay, yeah, the class is called Da Vinci and the 40 Answers.
Got it.
I wasn't clever enough to come up with that. Roy was. He's the better marketer, of course, right? But so TRIZ, it's TRIZ. It's called TRIZ or TRIZ. You can pronounce it either way. It's a Russian acronym that roughly translates to the theory of inventive problem solving. So a
Okay.
guy named Henrik Altschuler, a Russian guy in the 50s, he was in a library looking for books and stuff on creativity. What's the procedure? What methods you go through? And he couldn't find anything, right? So he's like, there's no books really on this. So he ended up getting a grant from the Russian Navy to go study it. And what he did is him and his team, they looked at the time, I think it was 200,000 patents.
Hmm.
So they looked at patents and started to look for patterns, right? And what they found was all these inventions fell into one of 40 categories. So
Mm.
it's called the 40 principles of Triz. And the idea or logic being, and I don't use the word principles, I use the word lenses because it's more accurate for how you use it.
Right.
So you look at a problem or opportunity, where do I need some fresh thinking? And I look at it through a specific lens. The logic being, if the history of invention through patents has been using one of these 40 categories, it's giving you a great head start and it's
Hmm.
making you think differently about it, right?
And these
So
categories are like ways of solving problems, right?
ways of solving problems like um, number one is segmentation. So how do I break this thing into smaller pieces, right?
Right.
And I use that all the time in business. Everybody does, right?
Hmm.
Is I can't sell $1,000 device right out of the gate. What am I going to do? I got to give something away for free or break it into pieces. An example is when I first started doing video a long time ago, like 20 years ago, when it was hard, right, to do
Right.
video, unlike today, is I'd do like a 1 hour training course and nobody would watch it. But when I broke them into 3 to 4 minute sessions, people started to consume them. So I just
Right.
took the same content and broke it into pieces. So that's one called segmentation. Another one is called taking out. So you just take stuff out of it to make it simpler. Uh, One just popped in my head is the very first, Apple iPod had no instructions,
Right.
right? It had a play, pause, fast forward, up, down on volume, right? It was just
Right.
super simple. The opposite of that was a BlackBerry, right? When
Yeah.
they came out, they
Everyone.
had
Yeah.
50,000 buttons on them, right? So photographers use it all the time. For example, it's called frame line magnetism. So you take stuff out of the picture so it's more interesting. Um,
Right.
I tell people this is you can prove yourself pretty easy. You're on vacation, take the picture like you normally would, then walk twice as close to the subject if you can without falling off a cliff.
Right.
Take the picture again, and the second picture is almost always more interesting.
Right. For sure. That's
At the
interesting.
at the academy, we have a screenplay writer there that does a lot of stuff in Hollywood, and he's like he'd never heard of it, and it's a good point because a lot of people that are naturally creative have never heard of Triz, but
They use it. Yeah.
they use it unconsciously. They didn't know they did. And he said, so like on screenplays, they'll take the first 5 pages and throw them away because the guy that wrote it is trying to set up the stage too close, right? He's trying to
Right.
give too much detail. So he took all the interest out of it. So you'll
Interesting.
see that in commercials and stuff all the time. One last one is just called the other way around. And you just do the opposite of what everyone else is doing.
Right.
So
Inverse. Yeah.
you do
Yeah.
the inverse of it. So Kerry Mullis, he's been to the Wizard Academy. He won the Nobel Prize for PCR, polymerized chain reaction, which every hospital in the world has a machine now. But basically, you were trying to extract a little piece of DNA, right? A a a section of DNA, which is super hard to do because it's so small. So his logic was instead of trying to get the needle out of a haystack, make the needle reproduce itself so there's as many needles as there is hay.
Hmm.
That was his logic. So he's not a biologist, he's a chemist, but that's where PCR came from. Is just now when that was explained to him, he's like, yeah, I've never heard of trees in my life, but that's always what I've done. I do the opposite of what the rest of the industry is doing, and it leads me to some, great ideas.
Yeah. No, I can see the ideas show up in other forms. Like I was thinking, the idea of subtracting or even adding or removing is also the foundation for blue ocean strategy,
Right. Right.
right?
Exactly.
So they're drawing from Triz or they just kind of like stumbled upon it, because it's just a lot of
No,
stuff. A lot of this is
most
common sense, but Triz can help you think further and deeper because some of them aren't common sense. Like if you're dealing with a mechanical problem, look at it from a fluidic, you know,
right.
engineering stance
Right.
and try to solve it from a different dimension. So that's
Exactly.
pretty cool. Yeah.
There's actually one of the 40 lenses is called exactly that, another dimension. It's like, how do
Okay.
you think about it from a completely different dimension? You can high speed cameras, you can slow stuff down. If you had like a problem in manufacturing, you
Right.
can't really see why it's making bad parts. You can do that. There's a whole bunch of dimensional change stuff that's used in cinematography and Hollywood a lot. And again, most people have not been trained formally on Triz. They just, if they're creative, they're using one or two lenses naturally, which I think Da Vinci used probably three of them, right?
Hmm.
But it's when you're stuck or not even stuck, if you need to brainstorm for an hour, just pick two or three lenses, spend 20 minutes on each one, and just, what are some new, fresh ideas looking at it this way? Like segmentation or the ones we just covered, taking it apart, taking it out, do it the other way around. do it backwards. You said vibration. One of them is called mechanical vibration, right? How do you just shake it or do something?
Shake
Quick
it.
story there is like the wings on my airplane. I sold it, the concept, to my wife because the video had a nice marketing with a 75-year-old couple that was nice music in the background, and they take the wings off and put it on a trailer and stick it in the garage.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so I can remove the wings. No, these wings are it's blood, a lot of guys, and several
Right.
beers to get these wings off. And I
That's
figured
false
out, and
advertising. That's false advertising. That's
I'm the
awesome.
only guy, I can't teach it to anyone else, but I finally figured out how to hold the wingtip, Mark, and shake it. It's like that vibration,
Yeah.
just the right vibration, then you can get the pins out because it's doing
Interesting.
something mechanical. It's kind of like shaking a jar of toothpicks, right? You do it
Right.
just right, and they're all
Yeah.
settle and they rearrange. So yeah, mechanical vibration is a huge one that's used a lot. So
That's fascinating. And when you were at Morton Thiokol, were they using these principles to solve problems? And
no, not a lot. I've taught it at every NASA center there is in the United States, so I was kind of pushing it. I taught it a lot with my organization, but in general, no, it was kind of, what's this weird stuff, right? But or people I'd get the best feeling, Mark, when they'd go, this is so. Here's what I love is when somebody's in the room, they got that look on their face like, this is dumb, Fox. There's no way you're making us do this. This is the dumbest thing ever. And then 20 minutes into it, they pound their hand on the table and goes, that's awesome idea. Yeah, right. So it worked. They got you thinking about it different. So I did that one time. You remember when Six Sigma and
Mm-hmm.
TQM and all those buzzwords are out there, right? So I
Yeah.
was presenting to, I'll just say the company, it was General Motors, right? It was like,
Yeah.
I have this creative thinking thing, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to explain it. And the VP cuts me off. He goes, Mark, I don't want my guys making damn paper airplanes. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I have another course it's called SIG, Systematic Idea Generation, blah, blah, blah. And I just started using all the buzzwords. And he slammed his hand on the table. He goes, why'd you waste my time, Mark? That's exactly what we need, not that crap you were talking about earlier. Well, you know what the difference is? Those are
Same.
brown slides instead of blue slides. It's the exact same material, right? I was like, okay, but I had to change the viewpoint, which is
Right.
one of the lenses, to change the viewpoint so he could hear it in his language,
Right.
right? So that's how I got the booking with those guys. But yeah, he hated the first approach, but I just changed the angle on it, right?
That's fascinating. Human beings.
Yes.
Before we move on, I thought it was really fascinating that Altshuler, or the guy who founded, Triz, or discovered or
Henrik
came up with the
Altshuler,
theory.
yeah. Yeah, Altshuler.
Altshuler, yeah. He was actually thrown in the gulag by Stalin,
He was.
right?
Yeah.
Because they thought, Stalin's like, oh my God, you're a spy, right? Whatever you're doing, right? This is, I don't know.
None of us were
Somehow
there.
he became a threat to Stalin. Of course, everyone smart was a threat
Became
to
a
Stalin.
threat to Stalin, and basically told him he was doing it wrong. Is what I understand from history. Is some of the processes and stuff that they were doing in engineering development. He's like, you're doing it wrong. You need to be using what I discovered, these Triz lenses, and he threw him in jail for it. Yeah. So yeah, I'll teach you. Yeah.
Sounds like the United States today.
Close, right? In some cases, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So when you left rocket science, where did your journey take you?
Went from rocket science to, I wanted to get out of the aerospace, that part of the world. I went to Parker Hannifin, which I thought would be a lot different. We made flight hydraulic actuators for Boeing aircraft, and it was still kind of like the government. So I was there for a while. Then I went to iOmega, if you're old enough to remember a zip drive.
I remember that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And that was, that's one of those, if you have a product that nobody in the world has and everyone needs it, you can have monkeys run the company and still make money. And they literally, I think, Mark, they made something like 100,000 zip drives without a drawing. They just kept modifying the mold tooling in the garage and stuff, right? So they grew from a few $1 million a year to 1.4 billion or something, like in a few. So they just had no systems or anything in place. So it was like they hire me and they go, you're in charge of the internet, which hadn't even really started yet. This was like 1998, right? You said that, and you're in charge of the call center and customer service. I go, what's a call center? I didn't know what that was. I didn't. And they're like, it's where people call and they have a problem with the products and stuff. It was like, I never really thought about it when I called. I didn't know. I thought it was the company. I didn't know it was a center of 100, right? So our phone bill when I got there was $33 million a year.
Holy schmoly.
33 million a year. And it's like, so what are people calling for? And then I got all these opinions, right? So then I
Right.
had to went to the engineering logic, because where's your Pareto charts? I mean, what's the 80-20 rule? What are they call, what's the top 10 reasons? Nobody had any data.
Right.
They were all just their opinions. So
It
I'm
was
like,
hard to collect data back then, by the way.
we
Not
just,
not
and
anything
this,
like it is today.
no, it's a lot harder. Yeah, you had pencil and little chalk marks and that kind of stuff, but you could
Right.
still do it. And it wasn't that hard and what ended up being like the number one reason people called. And I explained this to the chairman of the board, is like, there's no way you don't understand this. It's got two cords in there. You used to have a cord that was a power cord, and one that had to go a parallel printer cord. I had to go to the printer, which is how the logic used. But
Hmm.
that second cord was in the bottom of the box with a separator on it, right? So people think, all right, it's got a cord. I plugged it in. It should work. Well,
Right.
it doesn't. It's got to have the communication cord. So I just simply put a hand on there that just, and this is where I was using Triz back then. I just put a hand in the box that says, stop. This has two cords, right? I think that probably saved $5 million in phone calls, right? It's just, it was super simple stuff like that. It was like, this is not that hard, right? It's
Right.
just, wait a minute, don't do that. Plug this in. Don't go here. I mean, we had one time when all the frauds was going on and people were just, use stolen credit cards and buying zip drives and whatever. And it happened mostly in New York and Miami, right?
Hmm.
So we get in a meeting, we've got all these IT guys telling me all the money they need to go build a new system to protect all this stuff. And I go, no. I go, who's his name? His name was Jose. I go, Jose, he was the guy shipping them. I go, how often do we ship more than one unit to a person? He goes, sometimes we ship two once a month. It's always individual. Okay. So if anyone orders more than three, pick up the phone and call them and see if there's a real person there. Don't ship the 30 items they ordered.
Right.
He goes, all right, that's all that. Right.
No
So
kidding.
it was using some of these simple Triz solutions like, yeah, we don't need a elaborate system. I'll tell you one last story there because it got me in trouble.
That's
When I was in
awesome.
college, I was working for Oak Ridge National Labs doing research for them for some secret nuclear stuff I wasn't allowed to know about. But I had to cook this stuff, and it would go from a light purple to a dark purple, and I had to get it to like 96% concentration plus or minus like
Right.
2% or something, right? So you had to put it in this gas chromatograph, which was, it's the main reason I'm sticking to this story, that I never had a date, because you had to, by procedure, you had to watch it warm up for 8 hours. It said in the manual, you have to sit there and stare at it. I'm like, this is the stupidest. So then when I got to the specification, I looked at it more. It's like, it never said I had to use that machine. It just said the concentration had to be 98 plus or minus 3%. I'm like, well, I can see that with my eye. So I just made carboys with the different percentage concentrations and put them in the windowsill, right? And I'd go like that and get the thing, and I'd go, that's 97.5.
Right.
And I was within the tolerance. So somebody in an audit found out that machine didn't get turned on for 6 months, and then the whole secret world was coming down on top of me. And I was like, nope, it didn't say I had to use that. That's actually a lens. We use visible substitution, right? So
Right.
visual substitution versus mechanical or expensive machine. So that's
Probably not a very scalable solution, but pretty
yeah,
creative.
yeah, probably not scalable. But we weren't making large quantities of the stuff, and I was the only one doing it, so it worked. So
That's awesome. You mentioned earlier that PEMF, which I don't know what it means, but I know that we're talking about electrical stimulation, that is used by NASA. So tell me more about PEMF, because I know that you're involved in that nowadays.
yeah, PEMF stands for pulse electromagnetic field. So
Okay.
it's what it sounds like. It's electromagnetic field, and it pulses. Now the Earth, is 24/7 since the beginning of time, as far as we know, is a PEMF machine.
Right.
It puts out I'm gonna get it wrong, 7.31 hertz. It has like three main bands: a 7.83, 14.1, and 20.3. And you can take an app on your phone. In fact, I'll show you real fast. You can take an app on your phone, and I don't know if you can see it, but if you see the white line in the top, it's showing
Yeah.
about 40 microtesla.
Okay.
So
That's the
that's,
EMF you're experiencing right now.
yep, everyone,
Okay.
40 to 50 microtesla is what everyone on the planet Earth is experiencing all the time.
Okay.
So there's actually studies and stuff that show you need to be barefoot once in a while to be grounded to the earth for
Right.
good health, right? And there's some studies on African tribes that are barefoot all the time that don't get diseases, right? So that's what it is. It's PEMF. It's a natural thing that exists on the planet Earth. But as far as therapeutical stuff, so the frequencies have been around since the time of Tesla. I mean, it's not new. Um, and if you,
Tesla, Nikola Tesla,
yeah,
not Tesla
Nikolai
the company.
Tesla back in 1900, right?
Right.
1890s, 1900 and stuff. He was doing a lot of high voltage stuff. But what's weird is if you think about it, excuse me, in the medical world, if you think about it this way, is you've got mechanical, right?
Yeah.
Cutting people, stitching them, bones cast, right? I've got chemical, drugs. But in the Western medicine, we ignore the electrical part.
Yeah. And then, and that's what you're getting at with acupuncture and
Exactly.
Ayurvedic acupressure and those types of things.
Excuse me. Yeah. And a lot of the meridians and stuff in acupuncture are similar to this. But what happened, unfortunately, in like 1934, there's a thing called the Flexner Report that came out that basically said, if you're doing any electrical stimulation research, your university funding is going to get pulled and you're going to lose your medical license. So
Why? What was their rationale?
Carnegie and some of those guys that were behind just didn't believe in it, right? And they were the ones funding stuff. So Rockefeller and those guys were like, nope, we don't believe in this voodoo. And maybe they didn't like the Tesla type electric. I don't know all the stuff behind that, but I know that's what happened. Is
Maybe if
killed it.
people got too healthy, then we wouldn't be able to sell them drugs.
There could be that too, which is still part of the problem with it today, is why it doesn't get a lot of funding and research. Because most people don't know this, that 75% of the FDA's budget is funded by pharma.
That's right. That's crazy.
It's insane, crazy. So what happened was, so there's a guy named Van Gelder found these frequencies. They're all very low, and to distinguish it from an electrical current point of view, a TENS unit is milliamps. This is microamps. So it's 1,000 times less energy than a TENS unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not putting wires on you. I'm just using the magnetic field. My theory is, and the data shows it's valid, it's the frequencies. I don't care how you deliver it. It can be with electrical wire. It can be a magnetic field. It can be light. It can be this chair vibrating, right? So it's just getting the frequency energy to you. So it's, it goes, so what it is, there's protocols that about 8,000 practitioners use. They've been doing them for 30 years, super high success rate with it. The problem, in my opinion, is it's being held kind of hostage in a clinical environment with expensive machines. So
yeah, totally.
My goal was to make a pocket PEMF device, because one of the most common ones out there is called a Beamer mat. It's $5,000 and it's a big
I've
mat.
heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually sold as a grounding device, right?
Yeah, it's a grounding device, or for pain and therapy and a lot of those things. But it's you don't need the whole mat, because the frequencies resonate with the water in your body. So if you picture throwing a pebble in a pond, the energy's there, but it spreads out through the water in your body. We kind of know that because you can put this in your pocket and it'll help a broken foot, right? And it's not near your foot. And the number one thing I've been concentrating on is PTSD, anxiety, back pain. But PTSD is where I have the most clinical data on it.
Right.
But it's so my goal was just to build a affordable pocket one that fit in your pocket, and that's the device I have today.
That's cool. So tell us about the research for PTSD, and I wonder also, since we have a foundation that's supporting vets, if we could get some of these things to test with them.
Absolutely. So what I've done for PTSD is at-home clinical trials. So when they start the study, they're doing the PLC-5. It's the same test that the Veterans Administration uses. Right. It's 20 questions. It's simple, 0 to a 4. If you scored 4 on so it's self-reported, obviously. If you scored 4 on everything, you'd have an 80. Okay. Right. So the VA, Veterans Administration, has said if you score above 31 to 33, you probably have PTSD. Any intervention, if it's my device, singing, eye movement, a dog, puppy, whatever, if it moves your score more than 11 points, then it's clinically and statistically significant. Right. So the good news that I have is 92% of the people. So what they're doing is they take this survey, they use it 3 to 4 times a week for a month, and then they take the test again. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're just comparing before and after scores. So 92%, 93% now see a reduction in the scores. and 2 out of 3 see a reduction that is statistically and clinically significant, meaning more than 11 points. That's
Hmm.
the good news, Mark. The bad
Mhm.
news, and this is an interesting psychology experiment. The bad news is half the people will tell me, I don't think it helped me. I'll go, well, you went from a 70 to a 15. And right. So I keep building these report cards to show them, and people are shocked. Then so I've talked,
It's because they don't think they're doing anything.
they don't
So
think
you
they're doing anything. They
so you
forget.
take out their autonomy and they think, well, this is just passive. This thing is just sitting around my neck. I'm not doing anything. I'm something else that I must have done led to that decrease or that decline.
There's that. And then that part of it with the PTSD is it's programmed to try and erase is a strong word, but diminish those bad thoughts, right? So
Right.
I've talked to doctors and chiropractors and stuff about it. And a friend of mine, in fact, yesterday I was talking to him, was like, I have to do that. I have to video people when they come in and show them the range of motion, because 30 days later they go, oh, I could always do that. That
Yeah.
didn't fix that. And he goes, nah, 3 weeks ago you couldn't move your elbow at all, right? And then
Right.
doctors would tell me the same thing with medication is the medication. People will tell you, I don't think it helped me. It was like, well, okay, it did, and your whole family sees a difference, right?
Right.
So there's a weird psychology experiment with that, but it's really helped with PTSD and sleep and anxiety and back pain and stuff, I think. But that's the study I've been doing, and to keep the doctors are the only people I know in the science world that do statistics backwards. So they use things called
Right.
P factors that
Yeah.
say,
I know what a P
is it
factor is.
okay, a 0.05, if it's lower than a 0.05, which in real person terms mean there's only a 5% chance that the results were due to chance.
Right.
And my P factor is like 0.0007 on my
Okay.
studies. So
So highly statistically relevant.
it is.
How do they determine, like, if regarding like post-traumatic stress, like how do we know what frequency is going to heal it, and what is it actually doing? Is that,
What is
jiggling your brain cells differently? Like, what's going on here?
well, and
What's the
it's a
science
super
behind
good
it?
question, but so PTSD is not a brain thing; it's a full body ailment. So
Okay.
it's in
Yeah.
your organs, it's in your brain, every part of your brain, it's in your skin, it's in heart, liver, everything. So there's a book out there called "The Body Keeps the Score,"
Yeah.
which is one of
Great
the more
book.
popular books out there. So what it's doing is it's targeting, in general, it goes through frequency pairs, frequency A and B. So frequency A is what's wrong. B is where is it? So it might be inflammation in the medulla. It might be inflammation in the elbow or the liver, right? So it's a hard question because, and this is the argument I get in with doctors, right? Is what it's doing that we know it's recharging the cells. So there's a lot of research that shows if the electrical charge in your cell gets too, it's actually a negative, but if it gets too low, that's when you get cancer and you get sick.
Hmm.
So there's studies that show it recharges your cells batteries. Okay. So that's a layman's term. Recharge your cells batteries so that your body can fix itself. That's what
The
it's
cell's
really
batteries being the mitochondria.
Yes. Yes. Right.
Okay.
So it's doing that, and the frequencies are low enough that they travel through the interstitial fluid. They actually don't go through the membrane.
Hmm.
Right. They go through. The term I kind of think of as like massaging the cell, because it's not going through it, it's going around. But a ton of metabolic processes happen at the cell membrane,
Right.
not just on the inside of it, right? Or things attached to it. So that's what we think it is. We know ATP, and I'll say it wrong. I think it's adenosine triphosphate.
Yeah.
It's the main fuel for your cells. That's what they eat. There's studies that show it increases it up to 500%.
Wow.
How it does that exactly. So then I have, excuse me. Of course, I have some studies going on with some doctors right now in the sleep center and stuff, and they beat me up about mechanism of action. It's like, prove to me how it's actually working. And this is where I usually make them angry. I go, you don't know how aspirin works. Okay. Aspirin's been around for 3,000 years. You don't know how any drug in the world works. You have theories, but you haven't proven it. And they go, yeah, we know exactly how it works. I go, okay, so it's not a medical example, but it's the same thought process, Mark. How do you heat a slice of pizza in a microwave oven? How does it work?
Yeah. That's good. You put the thing in and push the button on.
You push the button on, and people are going to tell you the microwave radiation. The theory is it's the rotational frequency of a water molecule. So the water molecule is spinning and causing friction to heat up the pizza. Nobody on the planet Earth has ever photographed or videoed a spinning water molecule. Okay. So it may or may not work that way. But one thing So I'm not going to live long enough to get the mechanism of action perfect. Here's what I tell people is relief before reason. Okay.
Yeah.
My number one goal, Mark, in all of this research has been number one, don't hurt anybody. Okay. So I've
Mm-hmm.
done a ton to make sure the energy levels I'm using. Number two is I don't want to sell voodoo, right? I'm a scientist. I'm skeptical. I don't believe this stuff, right? So that's why I've been researching for 20 years. I'm running my own tests. I run it on me, right? Is trying to prove that it works with real statistical data. Dude, it is terrible how many Facebook haters there are. I get a message from Facebook every day about somebody wants to like go to hell. You should die. You're an evil
Jeez.
person. No, it's horrible. Every day.
Horrible.
It's every day. It's like, can't you find something else to do, right? And so there's
Yeah.
some negative people out there. Is like, I can't possibly work. Well, okay, try it. If it doesn't, it's not going to work for everyone. But I will say this: so far, 100% of the time when people told me it didn't work, I go, all right, one of two things. You didn't use it. You used it once and you put it on the shelf. You didn't use it 3 to 4 times a week, or you're not hydrated.
Right.
Here's what somebody told me, Mark, last week. Oh, I'm always hydrated. I go, how much water do you drink a day? He goes, I don't drink water. I go, why are you hydrated? He goes, I had a protein drink last week. That's what somebody told me. That's what somebody told me. I had a protein drink last week. I'm like, and then it's interesting because when you get to elderly people with arthritis and the Alzheimer's, they are
Everyone's chronically dehydrated and chronically hyper aroused and chronically underslept.
Yeah. Right? And the hydration thing, the older people, they're fantastic liars. They tell you, oh, here's how much water I drink. And they're not drinking any.
Yeah.
Right? They're drinking a cup of coffee or something or two a day, but they're not drinking water. So
that's a good point.
Everyone, so most people go away and then I'll follow up with them. I go, so did you drink water and try it? Yeah, now it's working. I feel a lot better. Okay.
I have a question on, so if there's like just an optimal frequency or a frequency for optimal health, why do we need different frequencies for like post-traumatic stress or bone healing or sleep?
There's an argument out there from some of the people in this field that I don't need specific targeted frequencies. I just need PEMF in general, which would be some of the earth ones like the grounding, the 7.2. A lot of people in this field with resonance frequency therapy, targeted stuff, it's shown that we do believe it's specific for whatever reason, because it ends up being a diagnostic tool, Mark, where somebody will come in and they'll go, I have this, and you run the frequencies and it doesn't help them. Then you go, that's the wrong diagnosis. There's something else, right? And then you start playing with certain things to find the frequency that works.
Is it possible then that the optimal frequency for human health is an aggregate of different frequencies of all your different organs and
Yeah, most likely it is, but to target something to get it back in correction, look at it this way: is this notebook has a frequency that's different than this pen, right? They both exist at a different frequency. Everything has its own natural frequency. So when you're targeting something like heart health or your liver or your medulla or your brain or tendonitis, the frequency needs to target that area. Now, the research, or how do you know 81 hertz is your elbow? Nobody knows. The guys did that back in the 40s or 50s. That research got lost, and then you just built on it. So the PTSD protocol, so it's going through pairs and changing every 2 to 4 minutes. It's the most complex protocol I have, like I said, because it's a full body. I think there's 72 pairs. Wow. So it's going through 72 different pairs going through your entire body because it's a full body ailment. But then I have people that just will run it for something aiming at one thing, but it changed something else, right? I had a lady last week. I have some debilitating itching on my arms. It pops up every 3 days or so. I have to stop what I'm doing. No doctor knows what it is. There's no name for it. Will your device do anything? I don't know. So I go try allergy and general inflammation. And she called me up 2 weeks after that call. And she goes, I've not had an instance since then. What is this magic? I'm like, I don't know. Right. I just guessed at inflammation and allergy, right? And there's one protocol in there, Mark, called brain balance. It's called concussion, but I don't like that because it's too focused. So I just call it brain balancing. All the doctors and stuff that use it at the end of the protocols when they're treating somebody in a clinic, they just run that one for the hell of it because it does a lot of magic and they're not sure why.
Interesting.
Right. So
very cool. Well, I want to follow up and see if I can get some of these for the Courage Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're not talking about hundreds. I mean, maybe we just have small cohorts go through a year long, healing process.
No problem at
So
all.
that would be
Okay.
cool. And that's cool work. So what's next for you? Are you working on any more books, or like what's like got your Triz mind spun up?
Actually, it's this, and I'll tell you why I can't afford the divorce. Okay. So my wife asked me last year, she goes, how many companies have you started in the last 10 years? I'm like, hell, I don't know. We'll go count them. So it was like 12. Okay. So I got to concentrate on this vibe, this device, and trying to get it out there.
Or
And
yeah,
my,
or else your wife will say bye bye.
well, she's the one. Yeah. She's the one
You
finance,
start
right?
number 14.
Well, she's the one with a real job. So she's the one paying for it. Right. But here's what I would like to do with it. Um, and like I said earlier, frequencies can be delivered with light, vibration, or a number of different things. And MIT, they discovered 40 hertz light reverses Alzheimer's by accident. So
Huh.
I called them up and I go, okay, it's 40 hertz, but you're missing a whole lot of other stuff, and I'll give it to you for free. They said, call us when you sell 150,000 units. I'm like, okay, I was trying to help you. But here's my end goal. So like these smart lights, right? I have right here, Philips smart lights. I won't say her name, Alexa over there, because she'll start talking. But let's say her name's June. Okay.
Right.
Here's my goal. I want to go, hey, June, run Alzheimer's in the kitchen.
No
Right.
kidding.
So you have
Yeah.
all these lights installed. So I already have the app that I built for that to work, Mark. The problem is some genius engineer at Philips decided when you turn a light switch on, he doesn't want the light to just come on. So it's delayed like 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds. So I can't flicker it at 900 hertz. If I could find an engineer to help me get around that problem, I have smart lights here, smart lights here. I can take existing lights, right, and turn them into a medical device or a therapy
Interesting.
device.
Right.
So with an app, you could just do it on an app your phone, or you program it into June over here, right? And just
Right.
say run that protocol, and then people don't even know they're getting the therapy, which would be awesome. But my wife says focus on
Yeah.
that
Focus.
one, focus on the
But
one you've got. So
that's a fascinating vision, though, that our homes can be our kind of like rejuvenation machines.
absolutely. Well,
You know.
I made this 3 years ago. There's the desk light,
Right.
and it just flickers the frequencies. This one works, but I have to hide it. You saw it was hidden because she doesn't want me working on that anymore. Right? It's like go make this one work
One
first.
thing.
Right?
One
One,
thing at a time, Mark. One
one
thing at
thing
a
at a
time.
time. Yeah. So that's really my goal with, and the main goal, as you know, as well as anybody, is the 44 suicides a day. Right? You had
Yeah.
22 veterans, 15 medical workers, or 15 first responders, 5 medical workers, and 2 active duty. So those 44, if I can change one a week, then this is all worth it. So that's really my goal. I'm not making any money off this yet, Mark, right? I'm spending money, but
Yeah. Right.
some of the pleasure I get, and if this doesn't put goosebumps on your arm, you're not human. Okay.
Right.
I had a 17-year-old girl at the Wizard Academy. Okay. I won't say her name, but she goes, Mark, I've never had a date in my life because I have Tourette's. She goes, no guy's going to go out with me. She goes, I ran brain balancing and my Tourette's disappeared. I have a
No
date
kidding.
Saturday night. I have a
Oh
date
wow.
Saturday night. If that doesn't make you cry, like, wow. Okay. So
That's
that
cool.
I know I've had a couple vets call me and tell me they were at the end of the rope, suicidal, and that this really helped them. I have a very good friend in Utah. I was out there with my balloon last summer. He has a 15-year-old boy that was suicidal. He ran anxiety one night and then he slept with it every night for a week. He goes, I feel way better. So
That's
he's
awesome.
not talking about suicide anymore. So that alone is like the most
Yeah. That's
satisfying thing of
that's your
doing it.
why. That's your why behind
That's
it.
my why. Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Mark, do you have a website or social media? Where can people learn more about
Yeah,
your
I
work
do.
and
It's Resona, RESONA .health, not .com, but Resona like resonance. But we set
Mhm.
up a page for your listeners, Resona.health/divine,
Yeah.
and they can go on there and get 100. It's $399, but you give them $150 off. If they want to try it. If it doesn't work for
Awesome.
them, send it back. I'll give them a full refund. Yeah, I don't want anyone to have one of these devices if it doesn't work for them. I
Yeah.
don't need any more Facebook haters, right? If it doesn't work for you, send it back or give me your money, right?
Trust me, they're not hiring, they're not buying it from you anyways. So Rizona.health/divine. Did you spell it Divine?
I did.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Because a lot of people get that wrong. Awesome. Well,
Okay.
awesome, Mark. This has been a great conversation, really fascinating, and thank you for doing your work. I look forward to following up on the vet issue because it's obviously a passion project of ours too. I've lost too many friends, 5 in the last 2 weeks, believe it or not.
Oh my God, are you
It's
serious?
insane. No, there's like a clustering epidemic
Oh,
that happened
Mark.
in the SEAL community, so it's just bad, and we got to help these guys.
Well, absolutely. I'll do whatever I can to help. You know that.
Yeah, hoo-yah. All right, Mark. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.